What's the most creepiest thing you've seen that you weren't supposed to see? I was at my high school boyfriend's house when we were 15. His dad worked nights, so I would go over and we would drink his dad's liquor and fool around. One time we found all kinds of weird sex toys in his dad's room. But the thing I remember most was we were using his computer and found a bunch of child porn. Had to go to a co-worker's apartment to retrieve office equipment and files because he had died suddenly of a heart attack the night before. When I got there he was still in his recliner. The funeral home hadn't picked him up yet. I was not a happy puppy that day. Post-edit for clarity, this happened in late afternoon. The office management had contacted the apartment management where he lived when there was no contact from him. Co-worker was always early to arrive. Superintendent went to check. Heard TV. No answer, so used his key. Early 1990s, when you could still do that. Yeah. I don't care what anyone says. Those files can wait. Walked in on my gym teacher with his dick out. In his office alone. In the 7th grade. What is it with middle school teachers? We had one science teacher whose contract was non-renewed because he would leave the students to run ourselves and go meet his boyfriend in the parking lot for things. We know this because once he actually parked in the lot outside of the classroom, which had big windows and you could see everything going on about 10 feet away. Another one was ridiculous enough. His desk was angled away in the back corner of the room, and while we did assignments he would sit back there and watch porn and touch himself. Got caught and fired after a student turned him in, and they found all of the history on his PC. The same year that I saw the gym teacher's dick, another teacher was fired for having an affair with yet another teacher. I think middle school is the purgatory of school teachers. Only had one that was cool, and he was like Mark Maron. Been around for ducking ever, so everyone kinda had to respect him and like him. A few years ago I still lived in my parents' house. It was about 11 PM and our dog started barking viciously. The dog is only able to move around in the backyard, and normally he would bark at cats in the front yard. But something about his bark was different. So I walked to the window to see what was going on. I looked out and saw a man looking through the same window. We both froze, and after a few seconds he ran off. A few weeks later, when we came home after work, all our electronics and expensive stuff was gone. Man, I live in pretty rural Russia, and like everybody else in the neighborhood we had a guard dog. It got poisoned. Died. A couple weeks later one night I hear a car pulling into our driveway and right in front of our house. My room had a window facing the road and there were no lights turned on. I just peeked at them for what felt like an hour, but was probably just 5 minutes. Decided to shine my phone's flashlight on them, and they instantly drove away. Scary as shit. I was chilling at my mom's house once, watching TV. This strange car pulls up. Dude walks up to the house like he owns it. Tries the knob. Locked, thank God. He turns around, walks away, and gets back in the car and drives off. Never got robbed, but I dunno WTF he thought he was doing. Found another mark with an unlocked door, I guess. There was a serial killer called Richard Chase who only went into houses that were unlocked to murder his victims. Because he figured it was a sign, good thing your door was locked, there are worse things than being robbed. When I was growing up, my mom and dad were shopping for a new house. We went to a new construction neighborhood to take a look. There was a model that my mom liked, and the sales lady said there was one being built down the street. It was about 50% done, but we can take a look to get an idea of the space. So we all hopped into the sales lady car and went to go look. We got in the house and she started to show us around. We went upstairs, and in the second floor bedroom, there was a guy fully nude and furiously masturbating away. I'm 100% sure he heard us coming as the house was empty and our voices were slightly echoing as we moved around. My mom screamed. The sales lady screamed. My dad said WTF. I was just hysterically laughing. The guy grabbed his clothing and just ran past us and out the house. I think the laughter was probably what made him run. Someone laughing at me naked would definitely hurt my feelings. I hear that's what you're supposed to do with flashes exposers. Laugh. They get off on the power of making someone feel shocked or vulnerable. I was 8 and watched my friend's dad beating the shit out of him from my treehouse. Looking back, it's no wonder he was the class clown. People loved him at school. That's heartbreaking. I have a good friend who came to school with a black eye once in 3rd grade. He said he'd fell or something similar, but somehow we all knew it didn't add up. He ended up telling my brother later that week that his dad punched him. That was 30 plus years ago, and we are still very close. His dad had severe dementia and passed away earlier this year. It was heartbreaking for my friend. As he put it, he wasn't always a good dad, but he was the only one I had. I was 13 and my stepfather punched me in my face. My entire cheekbone was swollen and colorful for days. Also mind that I'm a girl. He kept telling everyone that we went skiing and I fell. What a wonderful dad, took kids skiing on a winter break. He never took us skiing, he'd rather provide just the minimum and spend money on himself. He was one of those abusive people who'd be beating people while his wife, kids, stepkid me, and his alcoholic older brother, and a dog, and tell them how much he hates to be punishing them for most dumb things ever, or without made up reason at all, and at the same time, how much he despises them. He died in an accident 10 years ago, and when he did I finally felt safe. Everyone around was crying, and I was relieved and happy as I've always felt that if he doesn't go, I will have to. Some people are bad parents but good people. Other good parents but bad people. But ones like this, bad people and bad parents, don't deserve a single tear at their funeral. On my way home, I was looking at a busy street from the subway platform I was on, and I saw this guy that everyone knew as a scammer in the neighborhood. He'd throw himself in front of cars for money, but that day he threw himself in front of a real nice car and it struck him real hard. He flew into the four-way intersection, clearly shocked by the pain, and his head got crushed under a truck passing by that didn't slow down in time. It looked like a watermelon exploding. It's crazy seeing a full-on human who has existed for decades just stop existing in a few seconds. Bum exposing himself at the bus stop saying he needed to release the demons by jerking off. That makes total sense to me. My man had ghosts in his dick. Time for a sexorcism. My uncle was babysitting me when I was about 9, and so I went to work with him for the day. He was a landlord for some buildings in a city at the time, and got complaints that an elderly woman hadn't been seen in a few days from the neighbors. She was on the ground floor, and I think the door may have been locked from the inside with a chain or something, but he had me climb in through the window to open the front door for him. My naturally curious self crawled through the window, and instead of going straight for the front door I followed an awful smell towards the bedroom, and found this lady face up on the ground dead. The place was a mess, so I didn't immediately associate the bad smell with death, but I bolted to the front door and watched them take her away in the ambulance. I don't know any legal answers here, and I never really talked about it. Weird day. It's creepy to me, but not all that creepy on the whole. But on 2 different occasions I've helped my dad with his iPad and found very specific types of porn in open windows because he doesn't feel the need to close them apparently. I feel this, but with my boyfriend's extremely Catholic grandfather. He regularly has me or my boyfriend help him with technology, and the amount of times one of us have found gay porn in his tabs or saved in secret files on his computer while trying to fix things for him is more than I can count on one hand. I saw a pimp shooting up a hooker in a car then pushing her out into the street in Washington DC. I'm a medic. About 2 years ago we got called to a woman in the middle of nowhere on the roadway. She had called 911 from a cell phone with no other service. She is completely altered, can only tell us her first name, and didn't even know what state she was in. She thought she was in Florida. There was snow on the ground. Only one other number in the phone. We call it from another phone and a guy answered, and I don't remember exactly what was said, but basically told us he didn't know her, but he'd come get her. We knew something wasn't right, but it took a little bit to figure it out. After a little bit I realized this girl had been trafficked, and they were done with her. They shot her up with some drug cocktail, and dumped her on a rural road in winter. We took her to the hospital and no one had any idea what to do with her once she was treated. Later found out a woman showed up claiming to be her friend and wanted to take her. Hospital wouldn't let her thankfully, and police sat with the patient for protection. This happened a few times in the next month. Someone was cleaning house. Never found out any more beyond that though. When I was 15, me and a buddy were hiking along the Merced River to our fishing spot when we were stopped on the path by 3 guys with bull caps and bandanas covering their faces and holding shotguns. They told us to turn around and go back, which we did without question. Was very strange, since we'd been down there dozens of times and had never seen them before or after this. Found out a few months after that there was a clampers rally happening on the property of a guy who lived down there, and they were guards. WTF is a clamper? Sorry, I misspelled it. Clamper. Apparently they're a drunken historical society parodying groups like Freemasons. Essentially, drunk hillbillies who like to commemorate absurdity. Yeah. UMN. This clarification didn't help. As a kid I was walking through the woods when on holiday. I was only following the river up and down, so I couldn't get lost. I saw a tarpaulin through the trees and thought I would go check it out. As I got close, someone I couldn't see said, "Turn around and keep walking," which, unsurprisingly, I did, at a run. When walking back along the river the next day, the tarp was gone. Today I learned that tarp is a short form of its real name. Watched a gangland show. Saw an interesting tattoo and the location that would identify someone as having been in a particular gang and served time. Thought nothing of it. Literally the next Monday, I'm offloading equipment for a job, and as I pass a piece of gear to one of the new freelancers I see the exact tattoo in the exact place in the show. He sees me, recognize what it is, and for a very short, very chill moment we pause. Then I grab the next piece of gear and decide to stop watching gangland shows. I didn't see it so much as heard it. I was the first apt of the morning at my dermatologist's office and was sitting in the corner out of view of the receptionist's desk. The doctor came up to her behind the counter and started reaming her out, cussing etc. about some situation I couldn't understand, but he was actually yelling and super nasty. Then not 10 seconds later, he opens the door and comes out doing a jig and whistling and all doody-doody-doo, or shucks good morning Miss Senabelle, doody-doody-doo, like he usually did. I had whiplash from the 180. I stopped seeing him because the transformation was seriously scary. I had this experience too with my kindly, gentle, silver-haired family doctor. The receptionist went into his office to ask him a question about my file. The door was slightly ajar, so I heard everything the doctor snarled at her, cursing her stupidity and all that. A few seconds later I was called in for my consultation, and he was back in smiling, benevolent grandpa mode again. Scary. I'm a sales rep and was looking for a meeting room in a rural hospital's pathology department and got lost. I started opening doors to find someone who could help me. When I opened one door, there was a primate of some sort, not human, that was suspended by its wrists that had all of its skin flayed off. Presumably it was a primate cadaver being used for anatomy lessons, but it scared the shit out of me. The skin was removed from the skull, but the eyeballs remained, so it appeared to be staring at me as I entered the room. Pathology departments in small town hospitals are creepy as heck, and 28 days later. Seriously, that whole calamity could have been avoided if that dumb scientist yelled that it was infected with anything other than rage. Rage. WTF is that? Say it's infected with an airborne version of genital warts, cancer, gout, whatever. That'd stop me dead cold. At least, it's got space herpes. Driving a friend and his family to airport. He is an emergency room doc and I'm not. We watch a trail of motorcyclists who group of them out for a ride. Anyhow, one of the guys goes up, hits the side of a truck, and then cracks his head wide open at highway acceleration speeds and goes end over end with no upper part of his skull. 2 other motorcyclists stand there with sheet or something to block view. Hard to miss the reddish pink brain stain on the highway. My phone's photos synced up with my mom's, and I had found stuff meant for my dad. I will never be the same. Edit. Wow, one of my most upvoted posts is about my mom's nudes. While working in a level 1 trauma center calibrating medical x-ray equipment, I was in the emergency room. Hearing noises, voices, normal stuff. Anyway, I heard this kid crying, screaming at the top of his lungs. Sound like pretty powerful lungs. I was guessing a high school age. Everyone was moving fast as they normally do, however they had looks on their faces of deep concern. When one of the techs I knew well had a moment, I asked, guessing a kid fell out of his treehouse. The tech shook his head and claimed that's no kid in there. That's a full grown man who was riding his motorcycle and came in some assembly required. I couldn't resist. A 200 pounds man at over 6 feet tall in black Harley Davidson leather. He lost his arm above the elbow and one of his legs was twisted around completely backwards. A visual I will never get out of my head. That much blood. You can physically smell the iron in the air. That's what I get for looking. I saw a lady moving big blue chemical barrels into a garage. There was at least 20 in there, and she saw me and closed her garage. Drove by an hour later. Garage open. All barrels gone. I was driving to a Jimmy Buffet concert in Pennsylvania back in 2007 with my brother and 2 friends. We were just driving along and saw a 4-door sedan in the right hand lane about half a mile in front of us swerving. Figured maybe they were going to the concert and pre-gamed a little too much. Anyway, my brother decides to pull up on them and see what we can see. As we are approaching, we see handfuls of papers being thrown out the passenger window. Confused, we speed up and are just about to pass them. On the left we see a couple in their 50s in the car. The husband, who is driving, is just throwing haymakers at his wife right to her face in the passenger seat as he's driving. Time feels like it stood still for a minute. We are driving alongside with me in the passenger seat, window rolled down, flailing my arms around and yelling, trying to get the guy's attention. Remind you, we are going 55 mile lefts. Another car comes up behind us and we actually manage to block the dude in and slow him down. Meanwhile, my friend in the backseat is on the phone with 911 trying to get a cop out there. Long story short, we end up slowing the car down to a slow crawl and cops show up within what seemed like a minute. Cops took our statements and arrested the dude. It was a pretty quiet ride the rest of the way to the concert. I have been asked many times on here what a haymaker is. Imagine winding up with your arm and hitting something or someone as hard as you can. In this case, trigger warning, the man was driving and holding onto the wheel with his left hand, taking his right fist across his body to the left, almost touching the driver's side window with his fist, and swinging it across his body towards the passenger seat headrest from 9 to 3 on a clock. However, in a car you are mostly at the same height and this poor lady's face was taking all the contact. A few years ago, the wife and I were searching for our first home. I was in the basement of one of the places that we were looking at and somehow noticed a light switch that seemed out of place. I was flicking the switch as my wife and agent came down the stairs. My agent noticed a bit of light coming from underneath the drywall framing the stairs. With a little further inspection, I found a very tiny passage between the foundation wall and the back side of the stairs. Said passage opened up into an undisclosed renovation that was a sub-basement room that was completely rubberized with an industrial hose and shower head. Walls, ceilings and flooring was all rubber. It was 100% a secret murder room. My agent called the cops and 48 hours later the listing was removed and the home had police tape around it.